working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, Ralph.
Hello, I'm Ralph Fondo Empire, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. The Department of Foreign Affairs has welcomed 54 seafarers who arrived on Monday, the biggest group to come home so far since the start of evacuation and repatriation from war-torn Ukraine.
Almost one child per second in Ukraine is becoming a refugee of the war. United Nations humanitarian said on Tuesday, as the total number of people who have now fled the country since the Russian invasion began passed 3 million.
A new report warns that serious rights abuses uncovered in Myanmar may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo takes a camping trip to the forest where the country's future capital will be built.
First in our news, a 35-hour curfew begins in the Ukrainian capital. Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has warned of a difficult and dangerous moment for the city as Russian forces have stepped up strikes on residential buildings. First, let's listen in.
Сьогодні складний і небезпечний момент. За рішенням військового командування від сьогодні, 15 березня, з 20:00 у Києві, запроваджується комендантська година. Заборона пересування містом без спецперепусток. Виходити можна тільки, щоб дойти до укриття. Комендантська година діятиме до 7 ранку 17 березня. Тому прошу всіх киян підготуватись до того, що 2 доби доведеться бути вдома або за сигналу тривоги в укритті.
And this announcement comes as Russia launches fresh attacks in Ukraine's capital, which has nearly been encircled by Moscow's troops in the third week of the invasion, and that has lost an estimated half of its 3.5 million pre-war population. Now, here in the country, the Department of Foreign Affairs has welcomed 54 seafarers who arrived on Monday, the biggest group to come home so far since the start of evacuation and repatriation from war-torn Ukraine. In a news release issued Tuesday, the DFA said the group consisted of 14 seafarers of MV Bolton Itaki, 7 seafarers of MV Ithaca Prospect, 12 seafarers of MV Polar Star, and 21 seafarers of MV Riva Wind. The DFA, the Philippine Embassy in Budapest, headed by Ambassador Frank Simafranca, and the Philippine Honorary Consul Victor Gaina of Chisinau, Moldova, have been monitoring 23 ships that are manned by Filipinos in affected areas. 2 of these, including the Yasa Jupiter and MV Namura Queen, were both hit by shelling in the Black Sea and left a Filipino seafarer hurt. The latest arrival brings the total number of seafarers repatriated from Ukraine since February 27 to 247 seafarers, while 14 are still expected to arrive on March 15. It is difficult but important because any war ends in an agreement, says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in a video address as talks grind on between Moscow and Kiev in a bid to halt the nearly 3-week-old conflict in Ukraine. Let's listen in.
Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
The nearly 3-week-old conflict has revived Cold War-level tensions between Moscow and the West and sent more than 3 million Ukrainians fleeing across the border to seek refuge in neighboring states. On the ground in southern Ukraine, the presidency reported a humanitarian breakthrough of sorts, with some 20,000 residents evacuating from the besieged port city of Mariupol, where there's a critical lack of food, water, and medicine.
Two flights carrying nearly 600 Vietnamese citizens who traveled to Poland and Romania from Ukraine landed in Hanoi on Sunday morning. According to its government-run website BGP News, one of the flight with 288 people on board departed from Poland's Warsaw, and the other with 291 passengers from Romania's Bucharest. They are the third and the fourth repatriation flights over the past week. The first two repatriation flights were arranged on March 8 and March 10, bringing home more than 550 nationals home. As of 4 p.m. on March 12, more than 4,500 Vietnamese in Ukraine reached nearby countries, including 950 to Romania, 2,800 to Poland, 660 to Hungary, nearly 130 to Slovakia, and over 40 to Russia. Vietnamese in Ukraine and neighboring countries who need support or wish to flee from war zones are advised to contact their hotlines. Top American and Chinese officials met in Rome to discuss, in quotes, candid terms, Beijing's support for Moscow. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says Washington warned China of significant consequences if they provide assistance to Russia in Ukraine. Let's listen in.
I think what we have conveyed and what was conveyed by our National Security Advisor in this meeting is that should they provide military or other assistance that, of course, violates sanctions or supports the war effort, that there will be significant consequences. But in terms of what those specifics look like, we would coordinate with our partners and allies to make that determination.
China has so far sent mixed signals on Russia's bloody invasion. Beijing does not back Western sanctions, but Washington hopes the giant Chinese economy will at least not attempt to rescue Russia from potential default or send weaponry. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian told journalists on Monday that China had played a constructive role in urging peace and calling for negotiations. Nearly 10% of Ukraine's population has been displaced in almost 3 weeks of fighting. According to the United Nations, the number of refugees who fled from Ukraine tops 3 million people. These are just some of the faces of those who escaped their country in search for safety. Watch this.
Ты же хочешь быть крутой. Тебя на телевидении во Франции покажут.
Відправляється в сторону номер 2. Увага! Потяг.
Ну дай его тоже, я же тебя говорю, мы шли.
Інтерсіті Кракові до станції права головна.
The Polish, Czech, and Slovenian prime ministers met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev in the first visit by foreign leaders to Ukraine's besieged capital since Russia's invasion. The prime ministers, who arrived by train, sat around a table with their Ukrainian counterpart, Denis Shmyhal, and the Ukrainian president, who detailed the situation to them. The government statement said that the visit had been organized in agreement with European Council Chief Charles Michel and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And this visit comes as Russia pummels targets across Ukraine, including Kiev, which has nearly been encircled by Moscow's troops, and as Russia and Ukraine are due to resume talks to end the nearly 3-week war. And residents are overcome with emotion as they survey the damage inside their flats after a missile landed near their 10-story residential building in the Podilsk area in Kiev, including or injuring several people. Take a look.
Тут мы спали, спасибо. Если бы мы тут спали, мы бы не остались. Нам повезло, что мы в стороне было. Удар был вот сюда. Посмотри. Вот. Просто на уничтожение украинского.
Ой,
Да. 5:40.
Вони свет тут включили? Да?
Да, все. Где-то без 10:05 я лежал, еще проснулся, думаю, что-то чуйка плохая. Да. Только поднимаю, такой резкий хлопок, меня скинуло с кровати. Я упал, ноги порезал. Да. А потом после этого, так как начали убирать, возник пожар. Снизу, с 4-го этажа, пошел пожар, и оно загорелось все.
Сами понимаете, Рагулина.
мы пенсионеры.
Или что, но взрыв очень большой. Просто оно все вот так, во сне спали же люди, оно все вот летело. Я просто поражаюсь, как не попала ни у кого. Вы понимаете, меня еще мама инвалид незрячая, не ходячая, забрали в больницу. Ну вот, сами понимаете. Просто я держалась, а это просто, не знаю, начала просто такая реакция, потому что страшно.
Senatorial candidate and Taguig Bataros representative Alan Peter Cayetano on Tuesday said he would prioritize the passage of a relief, reform, recovery bill to offer concrete solutions to address the recent fuel price hike if he wins a Senate seat in the May polls. In an interview, Cayetano said the relief program aims to distribute direct financial incentives and subsidies to Filipino families, especially those coming from the affected sectors. He said the reform program seeks to implement permanent changes to the current system being implemented by the government, particularly establishing a comprehensive aid system to help Filipinos during crisis. Cayetano noted that the government still does not have a list of fuel subsidy grantees, considering that the transportation sector has always been a recipient of pandemic aid. Cayetano said he is eyeing reforms to the government processes in distributing aid so that affected sectors, transportations, hospitals, and quarantine hotels, among others, would receive it directly and more efficiently. As for the recovery aspect, Cayetano said economic recovery will be facilitated by programs for micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as agriculture. He said the government can give interest-free or low-interest loans to MES and farmers, with the payables depending on the duration and principal amount. Almost one child per second in Ukraine is becoming a refugee of the war. UN humanitarians said on Tuesday, as the total number of people who have now fled the country since the Russian invasion began passed 3 million, highlighting that 9 in 10 of those fleeing unrelenting violence in Ukraine are women and children. The UN Children's Fund, or UNICEF, warned that youngsters are prey to traffickers as they arrive in unfamiliar new surroundings. Let's listen in.
We have now reached the 3 million mark in terms of movements of people out of Ukraine to neighboring countries. And amongst these people, there are some 157,000 third country nationals.
Every day, over the past 20 days, in Ukraine, more than 70,000 children have become refugees. Okay, that's every minute 55 children fleeing the country. To give a sense of the border that I used to visit, the main border, Medyak, Poland to Ukraine, it is scores of people standing around buses and minivans calling out names of capital cities, or at least it was a week ago, and people getting onto those. The vast, vast majority, of course, are people with wonderful intentions and great generosity, but there is no doubt, given what we understand of trafficking in Europe, and that remains a very, very grave issue.
At Ukraine's border with neighboring countries, overwhelming numbers of traumatized people have arrived, creating opportunities for criminal gangs who are known to flourish in conflicts. Amid reports that families are being forced to gather water from streams and that fights have broken out over food, the UN urged the Ukrainian and Russian authorities to find a solution so that aid can reach the city's people.
And U.S. President Joe Biden will announce an $800 million in new security assistance to Ukraine today, according to a White House official, with the announcement set to come soon after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addresses the U.S. Congress. The announcement expected to come at 11:45 a.m. local time brings the total aid announced in the last week alone to $1 billion, according to the official who spoke on condition of anonymity. Zelensky is set to renew his appeals for more aid in his virtual address to Congress early Wednesday, as some U.S. lawmakers pressed the White House to take a tougher line over Russia's invasion. Biden had already authorized $200 million in additional military equipment to Ukraine on Saturday, and that came on top of the $350 million authorized by Washington also for military equipment on February 26, at the time the largest such package in U.S. history. The White House official did not give details on what would be included in the $800 million of security assistance to be announced Wednesday. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Mr. Bawal, may ibis ka, oh. Ba't It's a prank! Okay lang manakot! Pero kung mananakot ka para sa boto, bawal yan!
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, threats, intimidation, terrorism, use of fraudulent device or other forms of coercion is an election offense.
Sino kausap mo? Makaalis na nga, sa iba na lang ako mananakot. Mr. Pwede! Mr. Pwede! May malaking ipis sa likod mo! Nox! Babawi ka pa, ha? Di mo ako maiisahan! Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang pananakot para sa boto. Ipis! Hoy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. MMDA General Manager and Undersecretary Frisco San Juan Jr. said all local governments of the 17 cities and municipalities in the National Capital Region are ready for the possible shift to Alert Level 0 as COVID cases continue to fall. In a Laging Handa briefing, the official said NCR mayors have not made a recommendation for a shift to Alert Level 0 but are ready for such a scenario. Take a look.
Wala po namang nagsabi ng kanilang oposisyon. Ang napag-usapan lang po ay handa silang lahat.
In most parts of the country are under Alert Level 1 until the 15th or the 30th now. Earlier, Health Secretary Francisco Duque III said that the IATF and other health experts would discuss the guidelines for a possible Alert Level 0, which could end most of emergency restrictions introduced during the pandemic. A magnitude 5.3 tectonic earthquake jolted Occidental Mindoro at about 8:09 a.m. today. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology said now the quake is an aftershock of the magnitude 6.4 quake that shook the province on March 14. The aftershock struck 82 kilometers northwest of the municipality of Lubang, while the epicenter of Monday's earthquake was traced 110 kilometers northwest of the same municipality. PHIVOLCS has recorded 671 aftershocks as of 7 a.m. today. At least 224 of these were plotted or located, and one was felt. The magnitudes of the 671 aftershocks range from 1.3 to 5.1, according to PHIVOLCS. Earlier, PHIVOLCS Director Renato Solidum Jr. said the magnitude 6.4 quake, which was 28 kilometers deep, was generated by the movement along the Manila Trench.
The Geological Disaster Technology Research and Development Center has confirmed that based on the latest observation data on Mount Merapi, there is no indication of a major volcanic eruption in the near future. According to the latest observation data on March 14, 2022, there is no indication that a major eruption will occur in Mount Merapi. The agency's head, Hanik Humadida, said in a written statement issued in Yogyakarta on Tuesday. Humayda clarified that despite more eruptions occurring in Mount Merapi, Yogyakarta City, which is located 28 kilometers south of the volcano, would remain safe from the dangers posed by the eruption. However, volcanic ash spewed by Merapi, affected by wind direction and eruption intensity, may still reach Yogyakarta City. Mount Merapi is on its second highest alert level since November 2020 after showing renewed activity. Its last major eruption in 2010 killed more than 300 people and forced the evacuation of around 280,000 residents from surrounding areas. That was its most powerful explosion since 1930, which killed around 1,300 people. An eruption in 1994 left about 60 people dead. The Southeast Asian archipelago nation is home to nearly 130 active volcanoes. To Myanmar, where security forces have killed at least 1,600 people and detained more than 12,500 since the military coup last year, the UN Rights Office said on Tuesday. In a new report warning that serious rights abuses uncovered in Myanmar may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, appealed to the international community to take concerted, immediate measures to stem the spiral of violence there. Here's United Nations Rights Office spokesperson Ravina Shamdasan. Let's take a look.
We have just released a new report that sets out the continuing spiral of violence in Myanmar since the 1st of February coup of last year. And the military is continuing to engage in systematic and widespread human rights violations and abuses, some of which may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. The report sets out Myanmar's military and security forces' flagrant disregard for human life, bombarding populated areas with airstrikes and heavy weapons, and deliberately targeting civilians, some of whom have been shot in the head, burned to death, arbitrarily arrested, tortured, or used as human shields. And throughout the tumult and the violence of the past year, the will of the people clearly has not been broken. They remain committed to seeing a return to democracy and to institutions that reflect their will and their aspirations. The report concludes that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the military, the Tatmadaw, has engaged in violence and abuse as part of a widespread and systematic attack against civilians. Patterns of conduct that may amount to crimes against humanity. Mass killings have taken place. In July, in Sagang region, soldiers killed 40 individuals in a series of raids. Villagers found the remains of some victims with their hands and feet still tied behind their backs. In December, in Kaya State, soldiers burned the bodies of up to 40 men, women, and children. Villagers described discovering the remains in several trucks, with the bodies found in positions indicating that they had tried to escape and they were burned. Meaningful action by the international community is urgently needed to stop yet more individuals from being stripped of their rights, their lives, and their livelihoods.
At least 440,000 others have been displaced since the military takeover on February 1st, 2021, the United Nations report said. A further 14 million are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance, but aid deliveries have been largely blocked by the military in new and pre-existing areas of need, it noted. Under the ministry's guidelines on entry rules for Vietnam's reopening, foreigners entering the country are required to present a negative COVID test result using the RT-PCR method within 72 hours before departure or 24 hours via rapid antigen test. According to Telegraph.ph, during the first 10 days, all arrivals are required to monitor their health and notify to medical staff if they show symptoms of COVID. They also must make medical declarations and use the PC COVID application during their stay in Vietnam. Children under 2 years old are exempt from COVID testing and can enter the country with their parents. Vietnam officially reopened its inbound tourism on Tuesday after nearly 2 years of closure. The same day, the government agreed to resume its unilateral visa exemption policy for citizens from 13 countries, including European economies, Japan, and South Korea. Vietnam closed its inbound tourism and halted granting visas for foreign tourists in March 2020. It partially reopened to tourists under a vaccine passport program last November and has received over 10,000 arrivals since.
And back here in the country, all areas in the country are under low-risk classification for COVID-19 amid the current decline in the reported number of cases that according to the Department of Health. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere said no region across the country is experiencing case increase despite the easing of restrictions. Based on the latest case update, the 7-day average of new cases is 559 for the entire country and 162 for Metro Manila. Even with the downtrend of cases, health experts continue to remind the public against the threat of new COVID variants, including the Delta Cron detected in France, Denmark, and Netherlands. Meanwhile, the government continues to expand the COVID vaccination program with over 64.5 million fully vaccinated Filipinos as of March 14. In the fourth leg of the national vaccination days, dubbed as Bayanihan Bakunahan 4, at least 1.4 million doses were administered. The campaign has been extended, 1.4 million. The campaign has been extended till March 18. The National Vaccination Operations Center said the country is on track in terms of achieving its 70 million fully vaccinated individuals target by the end of March. And we'll go for a short break. ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Karapatan natin lahat na iboto ang karapat-dapat! Tama! Lahat ng Pilipino pwedeng bumoto! Rehistro na? Opo! Registrado na kami lahat! Bakit tahimik ka? Hindi ka nakapag-rehistro, no? Nakakalimutan ko. Hindi ka pwedeng bumoto. Mabuti pa, bumili ka na lang ng balot. Pagka kami pa bumili ng balot, pwede na kami bumoto. Hindi, pero mabubusog ka. Para sa karagdagang kaalaman, makipag-ugnayan lang sa pinakamalapit na barangay o bisitahin ang COMELEC website.
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Ngayong maluwag na, pwede na ang mga sports. Gaya ng diving.
Ay, nako!
Siyempre, kasama ang swimming.
It's time.
O high jump.
Okay ka lang? Grabe naman kayo.
Ang paborito ng Pinoy, basketball. Foul yun! Dahil doon nakashoot, foul yun! Maglaro muna tayo ng ating What's Your Name?
Ano kaya kung nabibenta yung mga saltik, topak? Ang yaman ko siguro ngayon.
Funniest nakaball videos!
Araw-araw ang dalangin, magbago sana ihip ng hangin.
Hello guys, this is Sarah Javier. Please catch me on Net News and Music on air and online this coming Saturday, March 19, 1 o'clock to 2 p.m. only here on Net25. See ya!
Magbago sana ihip ng hangin.
Bilisan niyo yung TV! Dali! Sakay ka! Akit bahay ka, no? Sino ka? Ako, si Captain Kutob!
Napakadali lang ng game na to. Naka-stockings kayo sa mukha, tapos hihipan nyo ang ping-pong ball papunta sa kabila. Hanggang sa makarating kayo sa dulo na yon.
So much needed bounce Wednesday as Hong Kong's tech giants led a rally in the city after their recent rout, while oil prices rose back above $100 but remained pressured by concerns over demand from China. However, while the gains are keenly welcomed, further volatility is expected as Russia presses ahead with its war in Ukraine and the Federal Reserve starts its campaign of interest rate hikes to fight inflation. Hong Kong was the worst hit with around 10% sit off the Hang Index in 3 days as tech titans such as Alibaba, JD.com, and Tencent were tossed out by panic dealers. The sector has been battered owing to concerns about regulatory crackdowns by Beijing as well as U.S. authorities, while there were also growing worries about possible U.S. sanctions if China were to help Russia in its war with Ukraine. News that the southern Chinese tech hub of Shenzhen had been put into lockdown to fight a COVID outbreak compounded the crisis, and the rest of Asia joined in, tracking a dip buying rally on Wall Street. Tokyo and Singapore piled on more than 1%, while Shanghai, Sydney, Seoul, Wellington, Taipei, and Jakarta were also up. Indonesia's largest tech firm said on Tuesday it planned to raise up to $1 billion through an initial public offering this month, despite tumultuous world market conditions. The Godo Group set a price range of 316 to 346 rupiah per share for the local IPO and aims to sell up to 52 billion in series shares through the listing, or about 4.35% of total shares. This price range implies an estimated market capitalization between $26.2 billion and $28.8 billion, the group said in its press release. Godo, the largest digital ecosystem in Indonesia, was formed by the merger of ride-hailing company Gojek and e-commerce platform Tokopedia in May 2021. Godo Group CEO Andres Solistio said, "Our listing will be a great moment for those involved in the success of our ecosystem and for everyone that believes in the Indonesian dream," unquote. The Jakarta-based company said it expected to raise at least $1.1 billion from the listing, plus an additional $160 million if it decided to exercise the green shoe option. Now, in other news, the government prefers targeted subsidy over the suspension of excise tax of fuel products because the latter has long-term negative impact on government revenues and the economy. A Department of Finance executive said during the virtual Laging Handa briefing on Tuesday. DOF Undersecretary Paula Alvarez said fuel consumption of those belonging to the higher bracket of society has the bigger share at around 48.8%, while lower income households' share is around 13.8%. Let's take a look.
So ang iniisip po natin, mas maganda na yung mga PUV at saka yung mga drivers ng jeepneys na nakarehistro sa ating Pantawid Pasada program, bibigyan na lang po natin sila ng targeted subsidy kasi po pag ganun, mas makokontrol po natin na yung ating koleksyon hindi po bumaba. Kasi nga po ngayong paglalabas natin sa pandemya, kailangan po talaga nating i-push yung ating economic growth at government spending. Kung hindi po, maapektuhan po talaga ang pagbalik natin sa June to November 2022. So pag ginawa po natin ito, mawawala po sa atin ay 48.7 billion. Ang Senate bill naman po, 2445, ang kanyang proposition ay isususpinde from June to December 2022. Pag ito po ang ating ginawa, 69.3 billion pesos po ang mawawala sa atin. Pag overall, sinuspindi po natin lahat, yung excise tax, including yung VAT on excise tax ng lahat ng klase po ng fuel, mawawalan po tayo ng 138.8 billion in 1 year or 0.6% of our GDP. So makakaapekto po ito in the long run kasi pag sinuspindi na po natin or ginawa nating automatic ang pagsuspindi po ng excise tax pag magkaroon po ng ganitong klase ng pangyayari, like pag yung automatic na hindi na kailangan ng batas para isuspindi, in the long run, malaki po ang mawawala sa atin. Around 1.5 trillion pesos po ang mawawala hanggang 2032. So tinitignan po natin kasi na yung tax reform o yung train law na ating ipinasa noong 2016 hanggang na sa succeeding years, ang gusto po sana nating mangyari ay yung mas mahihirap, sila po ang nakaka-benefit sa taxes at po yung mas mayayaman, kaya po excise taxes, kung sino yung mas kumukonsumo ng mas marami, sila yung magbabayad ng mas malaki. Kaya nga po sinasabi natin, ang consumption po ng fuel, 48.8% of the overall supply, ang kumukonsumo po ay yung mas mayayaman na household. So sila po yung mas nagbabayad ng excise tax. At ang gusto po natin, bigyan ng support yung nasa baba na kaunti lang naman ang kinukonsumo na fuel.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo takes a camping trip to the forest where the country's future capital will be built. Governors from across the country bring soil and water from the respective regions and mix them together to symbolize the country's unity. Let's listen in.
Khususnya di Jakarta. Artinya apa? Magnet ada di Pulau Jawa dan ada di Jakarta. Oleh sebab itu harus ada magnet yang lain.
The country is preparing to move its capital from overcrowded Jakarta to Nusantara in a mega project that has come under criticism from environmentalists who warn it could damage ecosystems in the region. On Monday, Widodo and governors from across the country inaugurated the site with a ceremony in which they brought soil and water from their respective regions and mixed them together to symbolize the country's unity. The new capital will cover about 56,180 hectares or 216 square miles of the eastern part of Borneo Island, which the country shares with Malaysia and Brunei. But the project has faced hurdles, with fears over its environmental impact compounded by the loss this week of investor SoftBank Group, which withdrew from the project without explanation. Widodo announced plans to move the capital in 2019, citing rising sea levels and severe congestion on the densely populated Java Island. The move is set to begin in 2024, but Widodo has cautioned the project could take over a decade to finish. Indonesia is not the first country in Southeast Asia to relocate an overpopulated capital, with both Malaysia and Myanmar moving their administrative centers in the 2000s. And ASEAN Focus will be right back after the short break.
Araw-araw may bagong kaalaman. Dahil sa Tony Knows, everybody knows! Your Kuya Tony Petgaba na hindi naubusan ng tips. Siyempre, from DIY to life hacks, sagot ko na yan. Saan ka pa? Let's all play together. Let's have fun together. Tara na, sumali at makigulo sa aming kada challenge. Sa kada umaga, kompleto na ang inyong umaga.
Welcome back to the program. A vast array of solar panels floats on the shimmering waters of a reservoir in northeast Thailand, symbolizing the kingdom's drive towards clean energy as it seeks carbon neutrality by 2050. The huge installation, covering 720,000 square meters of water surface, is a hybrid system that converts sunlight to electricity by day and generates hydropower at night. Let's watch this.
Excellency, you have the floor.
ประเทศไทยจะยกระดับการแก้ไขปัญหาสภาพภูมิอากาศอย่างเต็มที่และด้วยทุกวิถีทางเพื่อให้ประเทศไทยบรรลุเป้าหมายความเป็นกลางทางคาร์บอนภายในปี 2050 และบรรลุเป้าหมายการปล่อยก๊าซเรือนกระจกสุดที่เป็นศูนย์ในปี 2065
And finally, in our news, Papua New Guinea joined the rest of the world in observing International Women's Day. Here's Echo Hortelesa Quinola from Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea.
I am right now at the scene of the launching of the International Women's Day here at Sir Hubert Murray Stadium. Let's all witness the event. The International Women's Day 2022, with its theme Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, was well celebrated in Port Moresby. Various activities commenced in different venues. The Active City Development Program, Japan International Corporation Agency, and other sponsors and diplomatic corps led the walk and yoga for life.
So we are just bringing out all the women, particularly those who do not usually have an opportunity to go to the gym or to go to certain places.
United Nations representative delivered a powerful speech on recognizing women's contribution in climate change and to raise awareness of women's freedom rights.
Say to the women of PNG, you have what it takes. You have what it takes to bring a change to the development of this country. So take up the challenge and come in and make a difference.
And women's empowerment importance in Papua New Guinea. Thank you so much for your attention.
Another celebration was hosted by the Professional Women's Club and was attended by women with various skills and intellect from reputable companies in the capital city. Highlighting the event was a program at the Ella Beach where various stalls of indigenous Papua New Guinean produce and array of foods and fruits were displayed. Women from different communities of Papua New Guinea proudly paraded with their colorful Papua New Guinean made dresses. The supportive National Capital District Governor Honorable Powes Parkop served as one of the speakers in all these different celebrations, along with Japan's Chief Representative Masato Koinuma, Caroline Nyame-Awombe of the United Nations Representative, and Fazila Basari of Active City Development Program.
Celebration for the International Women's Day. It forms the basis by which we formed this country, the independent state of Papua New Guinea, which has brought all these thousands of tribes, 860 languages and cultures and traditions together.
Reporting from Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, this is Echo Hortelesa Quinola, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Echo. And thank you, Ralph, for keeping me company here on ASEAN in Focus, as always.
It's truly an honor and a pleasure to work with you, Alma. And that's the latest news in ASEAN region. This is Ralph Randall NY from your EBC Vietnam Bureau. We live in interesting times.
And we'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay alert, stay in the news, because we live in interesting times.